I've been married for almost 21 years now, and as a result of that, I now know that there are good genes and bad genes. I mean, like these kind of genes is what I'm talking about. I have two piles of genes. I have my work genes, which is what I wear when I'm standing in front of you, and then I have my work jeans that I wear when something useful has to happen. And then I have a third pile of jeans that my wife doesn't know about, and that is the you better not ever wear those jeans out of the house again jeans. And those are kept in a secret place. But when even those jeans are too far gone, I'm a terribly sentimental person, and I don't like to get rid of things. So what I finally consoled myself, what I allow myself to do is when there's just nothing left, I take this top button and I cut that off, and I keep that in an old saltine cracker tin. So you'll know what that's for when you see it on eBay. I was out in my backyard recently. I was chasing these 5 dogs. We have these stray dogs in our neighborhood. They're not really dangerous unless you're actually a bag of garbage. So a couple of the neighbors have to worry. But most of us, we've tried to get rid of them in a humane way. We've called the Humane Society, tried to get someone to come out there and get those dogs, but nobody will. And again, they're not really a threat, but we don't want them to acclimate themselves to the community any more than they already have. So as a neighborhood, we've just decided to discourage these dogs from being in our yard. So when they come in, we just kind of throw stuff at them, not to hurt them, just to deacclimate them. So I was chasing these 5 dogs across my backyard, and I had a handful of crab apples, and I was just kind of throwing the crab apples at the dogs just to get them to go back into the woods. And it's maybe, there's kind of a field behind our house, and it's maybe 50 yards from the house to these trees. And so I got about halfway across that field when all of us, myself and the 5 dogs, ran out of the mathless vortex that we had been existing in back into reality, and suddenly, collectively, those dogs realized that 5 is 4 more than 1. And that if one group was going to be chasing the other, the 5 ought to chase the 1. And so as a group, those dogs just sort of rose off the ground, turned, and started coming toward me. Well, I turned back toward the house and was running as fast as I could, trying to stay ahead of those dogs. But it's difficult to run when you're on a 12-foot pair of stilts. And I didn't mention the stilts, did I? Okay, back up a little bit. I was painting the second story of my house, the window frames. And in West Virginia, everything's on a hill. So if you want to paint something on the second story, what you have to do is you have to get the extension ladder out, and you got to raise it up to get it high enough. And then because everything's on a hill, you got to put about 8 cinder blocks under this leg of the ladder, and then dig a hole on this side about 2 feet deep to put the other leg in. And so it's just, and when you're doing windows, then you get up there and you get you done, and then you got to climb down and you got to get the ladder and move it to the next window, and you got to rejigger all that stuff. So I thought, well, why don't I just get some stilts? If I was just on stilts, then I could just paint what I needed to, and when I was done, I could just move over to the next window. So that's why I was on stilts. And then I saw the dogs, and I just started running after them, and I just grabbed those crab apples off the top of the tree and just throwing those at the dog. But now when I was running back, it was a little more difficult, and I was making pretty good time. I was thinking I was going to get away. But that's when I put my right stilt into a prairie dog hole. See, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that, that prairie dogs aren't indigenous to the great state of West Virginia. And you would be right to think that, but the kid down the street, about the same time he discovered eBay, he discovered his parents' credit card, and he ordered himself a breeding pair of prairie dogs, and they did as advertised, and pretty soon his parents, there were just hundreds of prairie dogs. These things breed like prairie dogs, and what they found out is it's not as easy to say, flush a prairie dog as it is maybe a goldfish. And so they just started chucking those prairie dogs out the window, and they had formed this Prairie Dog Town in our backyard. So as I was running across, I stuck my right stilt down into one of those prairie dog holes, and I couldn't, the other canine dogs were getting closer to me, and I wasn't sure what to do. I was trying to figure out what to do, and I kind of slung my left leg around, and I put that down another prairie dog hole. And I figured while I was on the 12-foot stilts, I was pretty safe from the dogs, even if they caught me, because they probably weren't going to get that high. But now I was about 3 feet lower, and so I just took the stilts, and I just started to kind of jump with them like this. I was just trying to kind of jump my way out of that prairie dog hole. And finally, I built up enough momentum. I came shooting out of the prairie dog hole. But I don't know if it was the jumping or what, but I think I caused a lot of suction in that Prairie Dog Town, because now prairie dogs were erupting out of those two holes. It was like champagne coming out of a champagne bottle. It was probably 500 prairie dogs, and I started running, and then the dogs, the canine dogs and the prairie dogs, they decided they were going to work together because, you know, they have a bond. I know you're thinking that prairie dogs and canine dogs aren't related on the taxonomic chart, you know, down past phylum, but they decided they were all going to come at me, so now I'm running from the 5 wild dogs and the 500 prairie dogs, and what I was going to do is I was just going to run around the corner of the house to the window that I was painting. It was open, and I was just going to lean the stilts up against the house, climb in the window, and then I'd be safe from the dogs and the prairie dogs. But as I came around the corner, I stuck my right stilt in the fire. I didn't mention the fire, did I? We had some friends coming over for supper later that night, and they're Hungarian, from the country of Hungary, and they hadn't been home for a while, so I thought I'd cook them an authentic Hungarian meal, and I went on the internet and found a recipe for goulash, and it said that goulash was best cooked over an open fire. So I needed to burn some brush anyway, so I figured I was going to be out there at the side of the house painting the windows, might as well have this fire going, cooking the goulash in a big cauldron. But as I came around the corner, I stuck my right stilt right into that fire. Now, you have to understand that these were not what you might call OSHA certified house painting stilts. If they were OSHA certified, they'd have been fiberglass, shockproof, and fireproof, but these were more experimental window stilts, because I wasn't even sure if the idea was going to work, so I didn't use my best 12-foot 2x4s. I just went in the garage and found some that had been sort of leaning up against the wall for several years. They were both sort of warped, but I'm kind of bow-legged anyway, so that went just fine. But because they were so old and had been leaning up against the wall of the garage, all the sap and resin in them had just kind of rolled down to the bottom. So when I stuck my right foot in the fire, it just went, I mean, flames just shot. They were just rolling up that stilt coming toward me. So now the idea of leaning the stilts against the house, well, that had more negative consequences than positive consequences, because I didn't want to burn the house down, so I thought I'm just going to have to keep running till I figure out what to do. So I came around the front corner of the house. I was running down the stairs, and it's a lot more difficult to run downstairs on stilts than you might think. And I got to the bottom of the stairs, and that's when my left stilt just got jerked out from behind me, just pulled away. Because, well, what had happened was I'd gotten to the end of the extension cord. I bet I didn't mention the extension cord. No, see, what I'd done with those stilts is I knew I was going to need to have brushes and the paint can and scrapers and all that other stuff. So I had just screwed a bunch of hooks into those stilts so I could hang all of those things from my stilts so they'd be right there if I needed them. And I was expecting an important phone call. I was hoping to be invited to the Charleston Tells Storytelling Festival, and I didn't want to miss that call, but my cell phone battery was really low, so I had just gotten one of those 1,000-foot orange extension cords and plugged that in the house and then wrapped that around the stilt a couple of times and plugged my phone charger right there, so I had it with me. Well, I had just come to the end of that, and so that got sort of unceremoniously jerked away from me. Also, just as I got to the bottom of the stairs, my neighbor, he's a Shriner, and he's the guy that's in charge of choreographing, the parade stuff, the little lawnmowers and the golf cart kind of stuff. And so he was out there working with the boys. This year they were doing this sort of roller skating extravaganza, Shriners on pavement, I guess it was called. And when they saw me coming down the stairs with the burning stilt and the 500 prairie dogs and the 5 wild dogs, those fellas just sort of scattered, leaving their equipment in the street. And so when I stepped off the steps, I put that burning stilt right into one of those roller skates. So now I was rolling downhill on one burning roller skate, and there is kind of a hill in front of the house, and I was wondering, how am I going to stop this, and even if I do, how am I going to get away from the dogs? But my most pressing problem was this fire that was creeping up this stilt. That seemed to be the worst, and normally, at this point in the story, of course, I'd just reach in my pocket and pull out my stainless steel 74 function Swiss Army type knife, and I'd open up something like the fire extinguisher or the water hose. But it's been a really cold winter, so I had turned the water off to my pocket knife, because you don't want to burst pocket knife in your pocket. And so so I went to reach in my pocket, but I was hoping to avoid this part altogether, but I guess I wasn't wearing any pants. Because, see, I had gotten up on that top stilt, and I had realized that I was wearing a pair of work jeans and not a pair of work jeans, and I've been married long enough to know that you don't paint in your brand new jeans. You only had to ruin about 9 pair before that really sinks in. And so I was already up on the stilts. I didn't want to have to get off the stilts. I was painting the back corner of the house. Nobody was going to be able to see me, so I just figured, I'll just take off my pants and I'll put them in the window. So I couldn't reach in my pocket, but I had to put that fire out. So I reached into my boxer shorts and I pulled out my stainless steel 74 function Swiss Army type knife, because, see, I'm an Eagle Scout, so I'm prepared. So I've sewn in all of my underwear an extra pocket just in case. Well, not an extra pocket, it's the only pocket. To keep my Swiss Army knife. So I reached in there and I pulled that out. And of course, all my neighbors had come out to see this now, what with the burning stilt and the roller skates and the 500 prairie dogs and the 5 wild dogs. And they were all standing there on the sidewalk screaming, "Fire, fire, pants on, liar." And it wasn't as amusing to me at the time. And then, so I got my knife out, and the only thing I could think to do is I opened up the blade that has the old stories on it, the fairy tales and the Jack tales, and I turned to the nursery rhyme, Jack and Jill went up the hill, and I got to it just before Jack fell, and I was able to grab his bucket before he spilled it, and I just poured that water down the stilt, which of course put the fire out. And now I just needed to get off the stilt, but I didn't want to jump because we were moving at a pretty good velocity. And so I took the knife and I started to whittle the stilt, just whittle it shorter and shorter, which again is more difficult than you might think, especially when you're rolling and trying to balance on one foot. And then I was coming up with a plan, some kind of plan that I could do about these dogs and these wild prairie dogs. And I had the plan pretty much down. It was going to take some precise timing, but all I was going to need was 12 rolls of toilet paper, a video slot machine, and 3 campaign signs. And I thought if I could pull all that together at just the right moment, I could take care of this. And about that same time, I rolled by the park. And I never got to test my plan because, as it turns out, down at the park, having their annual convention was the International Union of Dog Catchers and Prairie Dog Catchers International. Prairie Dog Catchers and Dog Catchers Apprentices International also, and they just hopped right into action, and they came out and caught those dogs and those prairie dogs, and everything would have been fine, except on the way home I was stopped by the police for giving a ticket for lewd roller skating, and also for using non-OSHA certified house painting stilts and burning, improper construction material when I wasn't supposed to be. And that's the end. Did I mention that? Thank you.